Bonsoir à tout.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to those loyal members of our audience who are still with us, staying here rather than going to the air-con hotel room that you probably reserved. Thank you for coming to listen to us talk about ecology and the circular economy. And the title is Sustainable Solution or Wishful Thinking. I would rather say, is this a tiny question or a major question? That's the way I'd prefer to put it. Is the circular economy an important issue or not? And we have two speakers here who are going to answer that question, each with their own slant, of course. I'm sure they're all going to say it is a major question because of their backgrounds, but they're going to convince us of that. Circular economy is not only recycling, although we are going to talk a lot about recycling, because it's the same in farming, it's the same in many other fields. But we are going to focus on industry. And I have two guests with me to talk about this. And here I reach for my notes to sum up their biographies. You can read the complete versions on the website. But we have Jean HORNAIN with us, who is a high-level athlete, French champion volleyball player. You may have seen when he's standing up, he's very tall, much taller than I am, says the speaker. And I feel I am tall myself, says the speaker. He was French champion, vice champion of Europe with the Cannes volleyball team. And he simultaneously carried out studies, he got his diploma, and he went to business school and studied at McGill in Montreal. He started working in finance, joined the Armory Group here in France, where he set up the TV channel of that company. He created the L'Équipe TV channel, and he's in charge of all of those programs. And then he took the lead of a newspaper called Le Parisien, which I'm sure all of the French speakers in the room read avidly. And at that time it belonged to the Armory Group. Then in 2016, he started to take care of a foundation and creating Citeo, which is an association which takes care of packaging and recycling. It was the first grouping to work on high volumes. François CLEMENT-GRANDCOURT is graduated from INSEAD. He worked in marketing to begin with in a company you may have heard of. It's called Coca-Cola. And then he joined a company which is as well known around the world as Coca-Cola, and it's called IC. Do you know what BIC is? He's going to tell us what BIC is. And it's not it's an international company, very big in France, and François, or Mr. CLEMENT-GRANDCOURT, is in charge of the lighter section of the company BIC, which you're all familiar with now. I'm sure you've all had a BIC lighter in your life. And they do biros and razors and everything. And they want to encourage you not to throw them away because you can recycle them. Now, I'm going to ask, both of my guests are going to start with Mr. CLEMENT-GRANDCOURT to explain to us what you do. And we want you to talk about recycling, circular economy. Is it just a subsidiary subject in industry which isn't managing to thrive, or is it a major question? First of all, an important fact, I would like to start by the conclusion, which is to say that the transition is doable and it is financially viable in all probability. The circular economy is a major component of that. As for BIC and our lighter division, well, it accounts for over half of the effort in our transition, which comes from the circular economy. So it really is something very important. So tell us a bit more about BIC. How many lighters are manufactured around the world? Well, BIC has 4 main factories for lighters. For 1.5 billion lighters are made, which account for 10% of the market share in the world. So much of the market is occupied by imported lighters, imported from Asia. Let's get back to the circular economy. Well, the first piece of good news is that we work with scientists because we have come up with a 7-year scientific program working with NGOs and other stakeholders. And comparing all of the data which we obtained, we concluded quite simply that the 2 main impacts are 1, using raw materials, and 2, the end of the life cycle of the products. The good news here is that the first chapter, i.e. if I can recuperate the products at the end of their life, I can create new raw materials, and so with a single solution I have managed to solve 2 problems. So the circular economy is absolutely key in this. The second piece of good news is that consumers are good at collecting, especially so in France. A few years ago, everyone was a bit worried about this, but today collecting is possible. So once you've collected these old lighters, what do you do with them? And that's where the thing starts to get a bit interesting, because we dismantle the lighters, our own lighters, we break down every single piece. And that's the difference when you do eco-design or not. A lighter such as this one is made out of 19 parts, whereas a rival lighter comprises 35 parts on average. And if you look at this kind of lighter, it can have up to 50 parts. So you might be wondering what that has to do with what we're talking about. Well, when you've got more than 25 parts, a product cannot be dismantled. It is too complex. No automatic machine can break it down into its separate components. And so there's a scale effect which can make the system financially viable. So we worked on this to bring down the number of parts in our lighter. For this type of lighter, for example, we've reduced from 45 parts on average down to about 15 parts. And so that means that every part can be used again. That means that when you dismantle this, you've got mercury. This is something we're familiar with, when we can use the pieces, the parts as they are. So the plastic which we use here to make the body of the lighter, it's called POM. We can use that again, reprocess it 10 times successively and turn it into new lighters without having to add anything whatsoever. No virgin material is used. So there we're very circular with that particular material. The final piece of good news, and I will conclude with this, is that means that under 85%, we've got reducing 85% carbon. That's what we've committed to, and we've got a roadmap which will enable us to learn how to do this, and most of this roadmap comes from the circular economy. Okay, let's have some figures now. How many lighters do you recycle? And what do you hope to recycle in the future? Today, we've got some pilot projects. We've done our research over 7 years, whilst also developing a machine. So it takes 7 years of scientific research in order to come up with a recyclable plastic. To be more precise, to understand the challenge of sustainable development on a simple item such as a lighter, it takes 7 years of scientific research. And then, only then, are you able to set up your action plans and find solutions. Meanwhile, we created our machines. It takes time to make the machines, but what took even longer was to get authorization, to be able to operate these machines and build a factory. It took longer to get the authorizations than it did to do all of the rest. And so the recycling rate is low at the moment because we're working on a low scale. Today we can, and this is what we're going to include in our next Sustainable Development Plan, we want to scale up. in a certain geographical spot to check that on scale, everything we have done today in Brittany and in Catalonia works well in a completely different geographical zone. Well, that's quite interesting, because in the Balearic Islands, why did you choose the Balearic Islands? Why are they recycling your lighters? Is it because of all of the rave parties where youngsters hold their lighters above their heads? No. We needed to... there was a lot of land made available, and it was either for new hotels or for recycling facilities. So it was good for the industrialists to manage their own products. And our machine turned up at the very end, so we knew it was the right moment. We went to see the authorities. We said, "Okay, bingo, off we go." And agreement wasn't 100% there, but we managed to make progress. Next question: packaging, objects. So you do recycling of packaging, don't you? Yes. If I were to answer whether it's a big or a small issue, an illusion or a solution, I would say that the circular economy, well, if the economy is not circular, it will not be viable, because economy cannot spit out more than it has. So it's an obligation. 50% of GDP around the world is generated thanks to services which are rendered free by the planet. And the resources of the circular economy are those that we use at Citeo. If we use what we use as little raw material as we can, and we use it time and time again. So what is Citeo? It's a not-for-profit business which was created by an entrepreneur, Antoine Bulot, and he wanted to make sure that a business was not, the business's responsibility for packaging did not end when the package left the factory, and that gives sense to the broader responsibility of a producer in the realm of packaging. For example, if you create a product with a packaging, you have the responsibility from the design to the throwing away of that packaging. This is a European directive. Well, it was France and Germany which initiated this to begin with. So it's a regulatory framework. It's called REP, the producers and broader responsibility. So you've got the responsibility of managing all of the waste which you generate. It's a simple idea, but it was really innovating back in the early 90s. And today, 30 years later, all French businesses that sell products, I've got 4,000 businesses which declare to me all of the different cans, bottles, cardboard packaging, etc. I've got all of their declarations and I invoice them. And 1.6 billion is dedicated every year to eco-design. So we make sure materials are reusable, and we fund the. So if you've got these waste sorting containers, we've got them all over France, where you can collect the waste, sort it, and dispatch it. Today, 70% of the household packaging is recycled. There are differences, of course. Glass 86%, plastic 30%, and aluminium 40%. So aluminium, and then there are differences from one region to the next. We're good in Vendée, Brittany, and in the east for collecting. We're not very good in Paris and down here in the south, which is where we consume the most. And just to wrap up, this is a system, it's a combination of public policy, which defined the framework, and the action of individual businesses. So it's private money in a public system, and it's a very collaborative approach because all companies have to work together, and we work with all of our stakeholders, the councils, the associations, etc., to make sure that we move forward on this subject.
It's not perfect and not magic, but it works. And it actually is having a lot of domino effect everywhere in the world. So we talk about 1.6 billion of revenue, I don't know how you call it. So it's not that insignificant. And what are the prospects looking forward for in 10 years? Well, we have a book of specifications from the state and we calculate the cost that we'll have to pay for all this. So the framework is very regulated because you're a company which is a not-for-profit company, and it's a mission-driven company. I have no objective of profit. My objective is 100% of circular packaging. That would be 100% and fully recycled. And what we have ahead of us, we have two subjects that are essential. First, we have a matter of waste collection. We can't collect cardboard and bottles enough. And second issue, how can we reduce the production of waste, especially how can we redeploy, reuse systems, so multiple use systems. Instead of using a bottle once, we could use it 10, 20, 40 times before recycling it. And we are setting up a program at the scale of 4 French regions in the east and in the north. And this will be rolled out everywhere in France, where we re-standardize packaging. That would be the same for different products. We wash them and we get them back in the market with a deposit system. We have to pursue the recycling stream, but we have to work on the reduction of pressure of scale. And whenever it is possible, we need to have scaled up systems, competitive ones, otherwise it won't work. A word on the reusable liquid containers. This will be done like in the 50s, like milk, butters, or fruit juices. Yes. Well, this will come back, that's for sure. This will be used for our cans and our plastic bottles. The objective is 90% for plastic bottles by 2030. And we collect 60% of our cans and bottles. The system of deposit return system, that means that we put a price 20 cents on a can, and when you actually will be given the money back when you return the can. So actually it's beyond 90% in this case. And may it be for the recycling of plastic and aluminium or development of reuse for washing purposes, we need to use a deposit return and returnable systems. Well, there's a bit of pushback from France, but since we want to be up to par with our ambitions, we need to, we need to go there. It changes from the systems of the municipalities and so on, but we need that if we want to be up to par with the ambitions that we have set ourselves. So what should we do for that beginning of momentum to take off? First, there's a learning curve about what we need to do now and in the future for the lighter. First, time. Well, to build a plant, it takes time when we need to design it and then build it. Secondly, human resources. I could benefit from a team that was stable for 10 years. And that allowed us, at one point, when we learn, saying, okay, if I don't have the teams that are here all throughout, then I can't work properly. And it's not easy to have an HR policy that allows us to have staff retention. Another aspect, on the human aspect, I realized that the one that knows less in sustainable development, that limits the whole team. So knowledge is fundamental and needs to be managed to upgrade the level of the whole team. This is one of the conditions and the prerequisites for the success of everyone at large. Third thing, the industrial transformation. It's not only we shouldn't only say, okay, we're going to keep the plants as they are and then we're going to add recycling to it. No, we have to reshuffle and completely the plant to make sure that we have an efficient system. That's more burdensome. And a lot of stakeholders ignore that and cannot understand and fathom the impact it can have. Where a recyclable lighter, is it more expensive and by how much? A recyclable lighter nowadays, I'm not going to say that it's more expensive. The question is, what about the organization and the scaling up? You were talking about mass production earlier. Mass production is key. We need to have standardized products that will allow machines to continue working 24/7. And also verticals. We have chemistry, we have applied R&D, we have a lot of labs, and this allows us to go fast. And yet we needed 10 years to do so. Fourth point, having French rules, it's a good thing, or German rules, it's a good thing. Yet, if I have different rules in each country of Europe, I have a problem. The rules are not aligned as we speak. And another element which is key is the authorities. We have a risk on sustainable development. That's the free riders, the competitors that are not going to comply by the rules or that are not going to pay the taxes. And this has a huge impact because this has an impact on security aspects for a product. Lighters that are not in compliance with the security standards and yet which are on the French territory, 80% of these lighters, we have 30,000 people that are burned because of these lighters. So do not buy Chinese lighters. Well, I leave it up to you to infer whatever you need. So 50 billion of societal cost is implied. What each lighter that is not in compliance should be sold at the price of 250 euros to fund all these problems. But also the customs do not exist anymore in Europe. They exist in North America, in Brazil, in New Zealand. But if there's no control on the aspect of sustainable development will not be able to follow through because there's no loyal competition, no fair trade. So we need regulation. Without regulation, it won't work, and it needs to be standardized, not a Franco-French one, because otherwise we're going to have problems. Second condition for me, we need to set objectives that are reachable or to harness the drivers that make it possible to reach those objectives. For example, for bottle collection by 80%, we can only reach it in 5 years if we change the way in which we do collection. So we need to walk the talk, even if changes are needed, because otherwise we're not going to make it. And I don't want to pay lip service and I want to make sure that whatever we say, we do. And then also the extended producer responsibility. Everyone needs to be controlled, and the stakeholders that are the companies need to steer the action. And so we need governance within the streams that avoid non-efficient inflation. It went from 100 million to 1.3 billion in 2025. So we take money from corporations, but we have no associated efficiency yet. We have become a big obligation of means where we should have outcome, we should have performance, we should have a result. And companies do not understand what they pay anymore. They say, okay, you're nice, you're making us pay a tax. So, okay, there's objectives, but I have no choice on the means. And the last point, I'm going to call it, I don't know, I'm not a specialist of Europe, but let's call them European hurdles, because we can see that there are lighters or recycling coming from China. We try to develop that in France, but we can't invest if things arrive here in France at very low prices and competition is not possible. And when you're talking about time, I think we agree it requires time. We need to have visions over the long run, and we need a willingness to go there. It's never short term. In 6 months, it never works. In 1 year, it doesn't work. We need to think over the long term, and we need to find a long-term vision if we want to succeed. Maybe we would need to enlarge Citeo to whole France, to whole Europe. Maybe we need to make them champions of recycling. Yes, well, Citeos are everywhere in Europe. And they are in Canada, California. Why? Because this gets all companies on board on environmental impact, and it makes them pay for the negative and adverse externalities. And what we want to do is to make sure that there's everywhere in the world. And if we could see, actually, if that was a reality, we wouldn't see beaches littered with waste everywhere on TV when we switch it on. There's no questions because it was very short. And that's it. And the room is now free. Thank you.